The city of Vierx Prime never truly slept. Its towers glowed day and night, and flying vehicles crossed the sky like silent stars. Music played from public screens, and announcements echoed in many languages. It was a city built for power, money, and important people. But beneath all that light, there were shadows where forgotten lives struggled to survive. Under an old transit bridge, where broken lights flickered and rainwater dripped endlessly, lived a young alien girl named Rihanna. She was small for her age, thin like she had been carved by hunger itself. Her skin carried a soft blue color dulled by dirt and cold. One of her eyes shone gold, the other deep violet, a sign of mixed blood that made others fear her. Her clothes were torn and stitched many times, and her feet were bare against the freezing metal floor. People passed above her every day. They never looked down. Rihanna learned early that the city did not care. Guards chased her away from warm places. Shop owners threw trash near her, never to her. Some aliens whispered bad words when they saw her face. Humans, when they appeared, often looked sad, but even they did not stop. She survived by collecting scraps, broken parts, and sometimes forgotten food. At night, she wrapped herself in plastic sheets and watched the lights, wondering how something so beautiful could feel so cold. That evening, the rain was heavy. It soaked her hair and ran down her face like tears she refused to cry. She searched near the market district, hoping to find something edible before night patrols arrived. Then she saw it. A black purse lay near a transport platform, clean and untouched by the rain, as if the city itself was protecting it. Rihanna froze, her heart beat fast. She looked around, no one was there. Slowly, carefully, she picked it up. It was heavy, too heavy for something so small. Her hands trembled as she opened it just a little. Inside were glowing credit chips, identification seals, and a metal badge with a strange symbol, an earth eagle wrapped in stars. She did not know much about humans, but she knew that symbol meant importance. This purse could change everything. With this much credit, she could leave the streets. She could eat warm food. She could hide forever. The city would never know. For a long moment, Rihanna stood in the rain, staring at the purse. Hunger twisted in her stomach. Fear whispered in her mind. The bridge above roared as a train passed, shaking the ground like a warning. Then she remembered her mother. Her mother had been kind, even when the world was not. Before sickness took her, she used to hold Rihanna close and speak softly. "Even if they treat you like nothing," her mother once said, "do not become nothing. One good choice can keep your heart alive." Rihanna closed the purse. She wiped her face and looked at the symbol again. The badge had a faint tracking light. She followed it, step by step, toward the bright center of the city, toward places she was never allowed to go. The streets changed as she walked. Broken floors became clean paths. Guards appeared at every corner. Tall buildings reflected her small figure like a mistake that did not belong. Her legs hurt, her chest burned. Fear grew stronger with every step. When she reached the grand white building where many flags floated in the air, she almost turned back. This was the diplomatic hall. Important beings walked here, powerful ones. Rihanna clutched the purse tightly. "I will just return it," she whispered to herself. "Then I will go." Rain dripped from her hair as she approached the entrance. The doors opened, and the world inside fell silent. Rihanna stepped cautiously into the white hall of Vierx Prime, her small feet echoing faintly on the polished floor. The space was enormous, filled with glass panels, floating lights, and alien delegates in long robes of every color imaginable. Some spoke in harsh clicks and hisses, others in smooth, flowing tones, all arguing loudly about matters Rihanna could barely understand. Yet even in the chaos, she noticed something important: the humans. They moved differently. Calm. Careful, their eyes scanned the room with curiosity rather than suspicion. Her hands tightened around the black purse. She had never been inside such a place. The walls seemed too bright, the floor too clean, the air too sharp. Every step she took made her feel smaller, thinner, like she could disappear entirely if anyone noticed. And yet she had a duty, a promise her mother had whispered once: do one good thing. At the center of the hall stood Ambassador Daniel Hargreave, a human man in a crisp white uniform. He had the look of someone who had seen far too much of the galaxy and still carried hope in his heart. His face was drawn with concern as he checked a small console beside him. The purse. It was missing. Every item inside could have caused disaster if lost. Peace codes, communication devices, and even a personal letter from his daughter on Earth. Rihanna froze. She had not imagined the weight of her responsibility. She wanted to run back into the rain, hide under her bridge, and forget this strange world. But something inside her tightened, a pulse of courage her mother had planted long ago. She stepped forward. The room seemed to notice her. Delegates paused mid-argument. A floating screen flickered, catching her pale blue skin and mismatched eyes. Gold and violet glimmered faintly in the hall's harsh light. Security units moved closer, scanning the entrance. Weapons that could cut through steel hovered in midair. Rihanna's small voice barely rose above the murmurs. It fell, she said in broken trade speech, holding the purse out with trembling hands. Daniel's eyes widened and then softened. The hall was silent, not a single being moved. He could feel the fear radiating from her, the years of cold nights and empty meals reflected in her gaze. He did not see a street alien. He saw honesty, courage, and a life that the galaxy had tried to erase. He stepped forward slowly, every movement careful not to startle her. When he reached her, he knelt down, lowering himself to her level. The gesture shocked everyone. Delegates murmured. Guards stiffened. Humans were not known for kneeling to strangers, especially not street children. Rihanna flinched. She had never been treated like this, never given respect, never shown that she mattered. His hand reached out, covering hers around the purse. It did not touch her harshly, just steady, a silent promise of safety. "I lost this," Daniel said gently. "You returned it." Her lips parted, but no words came. Fear and surprise tangled inside her chest. For the first time, someone outside the streets looked at her and did not see a problem, a mistake, or a nuisance. He saw value. Guards whispered to one another, debating if she should be removed. High-ranking aliens began to argue. Some muttered that humans were weak to allow such a creature into the hall, but Daniel shook his head. His voice was calm, yet firm. "She showed honor," he said. "I will show the same." The simple words struck Rihanna more than any weapon or comfort. They were a lifeline thrown across the galaxy. Tears welled in her mismatched eyes. She wanted to shrink, to vanish into herself, but she could not. Not now, not when she had done something right. One of the younger delegates, curious despite fear, whispered, "Who is she?" "She is proof," Daniel answered without looking up, still kneeling. "Proof that honesty and courage exist where we least expect them." Rihanna handed him the purse fully, her fingers trembling so badly she thought they might break. Daniel opened it. Everything was intact. The peace codes, the chips, the letter. Relief flooded him, but he did not smile. He looked at her, really looked at her, seeing the thin blue girl who had walked miles through rain and fear to do the right thing. Then he did something even more unexpected. He offered her his coat, draping it over her small shoulders. It was warm, clean, and heavy. For a moment, she could feel safety, something she had never known. The hall did not return to its previous noise. Everyone waited. Something had shifted. The street girl and the human diplomat had rewritten the rules, if only for a moment. And Rihanna, for the first time in her life, understood that her small action could reach further than any street she had ever known. The hall remained silent, the kind of silence that pressed against Rihanna like the cold nights she had spent under the bridges. The purse was safe, yet her chest still pounded. She had done something important, something that could have caused disaster if she had failed. Now, standing there with Daniel's coat draped over her shoulders, she felt the weight of more than the fabric. She felt the weight of attention, of judgment, of countless eyes staring at her small blue form. Delegates whispered, their voices sharp as broken glass. Security drones hovered, ready to act. One of the alien counselors leaned forward, their long fingers tapping against the edge of a crystalline podium. "Ambassador," they said, their tone both accusing and curious, "this street alien cannot remain. She poses a risk. Protocols." Daniel shook his head slowly. His eyes met the counselor with quiet strength. "She is no risk," he said. "She returned something that was lost. That is honor. That is worth more than any protocol." Murmurs filled the room. Some delegates scoffed, some leaned in, listening. Rihanna did not understand most of the words, but she understood the meaning. For the first time, someone had taken her side in a place where her kind were invisible. She felt her chest tighten with a strange, new hope. The counselor's eyes narrowed. She is a child of the streets, her kind. She is a child, Daniel interrupted, his voice low but firm. And we owe her safety, not punishment. Rihanna's small lips parted. No one had ever spoken like that on her behalf before. Not in words, not in gestures, not in the faintest sign of respect. Fear and relief tangled inside her, making her knees weak. She wanted to run, to hide, but she stayed. Something inside her, small but strong, said, "This is right. Stand." Daniel gestured toward the hall. Let her see the world, even if for one day. Let her know that honesty is recognized, that courage is honored. Some humans in the hall nodded quietly, others looked surprised. Alien delegates shifted uncomfortably, but none dared contradict him openly. Daniel's words carried weight he had earned over years, weight they could not dismiss easily. Rihanna swallowed. Her small voice trembled, barely audible. I just wanted to give it back." Daniel smiled softly, and that made all the difference. The room seemed to breathe around them. The tension that had gripped the hall loosened. Yet outside, Rihanna's life remained unchanged in many ways. The city was still full of shadows, and danger lingered in the alleys she knew so well. She would return to those streets soon, she knew. But for this moment, she belonged somewhere else. A young delegate, curious despite caution, stepped forward. "But if she stays," they whispered, "it could anger the council, destroy negotiations. We cannot allow this." Daniel shook his head again. Justice and honesty are not optional. If this room cannot recognize that, it is the room that must change, not her. Rihanna looked up at him. She saw determination in his eyes, a strength she had never imagined possible. He was not a soldier, not a ruler. He was a human who chose to protect what was right, even against pressure and fear. The security drones hovered closer, their sensors scanning her form. Some delegates whispered about removal. Daniel stepped between her and the machines. "Do not touch her. She has done nothing but good." A faint warmth spread through Rihanna. She had never known protection like this. Her life had been a constant battle against neglect, hunger, and fear. Now, for the first time, someone carried her, not physically, but with trust, with respect, with care. The hall shifted. Cameras floated above, capturing the moment. The story of the small alien girl and the human ambassador was being recorded, broadcast, and remembered even as it happened. Finally, Daniel extended a hand. "Come with me," he said. "I will make sure you are safe." Rihanna hesitated, her mind racing. She had never left the streets willingly, never trusted anyone fully. Yet something in his calm, steady presence told her that this was not a trap. This was a chance to see a world she had only glimpsed from bridges and shadows. She placed her tiny hand in his. The touch was warm, solid, and unafraid. For the first time in her life, Rihanna felt seen, not as a street child, not as an outcast, but as someone who mattered. The hall waited, tense and uncertain. But Daniel did not falter. He walked forward, Rihanna beside him, each step echoing a simple truth. That courage, honesty, and compassion could shift the hearts of even the most skeptical. Outside, the city continued in its indifferent rhythm. But inside, a small alien girl had begun to change the world. And no one present would ever forget the sight of the human who knelt before her, choosing justice over protocol, humanity over fear. The hall was quiet, but outside, the city was stirring with whispers and rumors. Rihanna had never experienced attention like this. Usually, she was invisible, a shadow beneath the lights. Now drones floated above the streets and screens in public squares replayed her small blue figure returning the human ambassador's purse. Some viewers were amazed. Many were angry. Most were confused. She had returned to the temporary quarters Daniel had arranged for her. A small room, clean and warm, a sharp contrast to the frozen bridges and grimy alleyways she called home. Rain dripped from the windows, but inside the air smelled of soap and old wood, a strange comfort she could not name. For a moment, Rihanna allowed herself to breathe. She had done a good thing. She had acted with honesty. But the city's reaction reminded her how fragile safety could be. Her ears picked up the news broadcasts. Alien pundits calling her a manipulator, humans debating whether the ambassador had made a mistake, hardliners demanding she be removed. Some protesters gathered outside Daniel's building, waving signs with angry slogans, their faces twisted with suspicion and fear. Rihanna shivered. She wanted to hide under her bed, under the blankets that smelled unfamiliar yet comforting. But she could not. She had stepped into a world that would not let her go unnoticed. Then the first real threat appeared. Acid had been thrown at the embassy gates, small, harmless to humans, but terrifying to anyone smaller, weaker, or more exposed. Rihanna froze at the news, her small hands gripping the edge of the table. She had seen worse on the streets, but this was different. This was deliberate, targeted. "I should leave," she whispered to herself, her voice trembling. "Bad things always follow me." Daniel heard her. He knelt beside her again, just as he had in the hall, his hand steady on her shoulder. "Bad things follow injustice," he said softly. "You didn't create this. You only returned what was lost." She wanted to believe him. She wanted to. But fear was a heavier companion than hope, and it had traveled with her through every alley and every cold night. Her eyes filled with tears, and she looked away, pretending to examine the clean floor as if that could erase the danger surrounding her. The news worsened. False records appeared online claiming that Rihanna's species had betrayed a coalition world decades ago. Entire galaxies debated her loyalty. The council demanded her removal. Daniel's office received endless urgent messages, all demanding that the ambassador protect the alliance, not the girl. If she remained, the delicate peace talks could collapse. He looked at her standing small in the corner, clutching her knees. Her mismatched eyes reflected the warm light of the room and the cold weight of fear. For a human, the choice was clear in his mind, but it was not simple. Protect the alliance and leave her to the streets, or protect the girl and risk everything. He knelt again, bringing his eyes to hers. "I choose to protect you," he said softly, as though his words could shield her. "Not because it is easy, not because it is safe, because it is right." Rihanna's lips quivered. She had never heard words like that, never from anyone, not even her mother, who had only given guidance from frail, whispered breaths. She wanted to run into his arms, but pride and fear rooted her to the spot. Yet the warmth of his words sank deep, spreading through her like sunlight through the cracks of broken stone. Outside, the city began to stir more violently. Protests grew, alien media spun stories, humans debated internally about the ambassador's choices. Some called Daniel reckless, others called him brave. But in the middle of it all, one small girl sat on a chair, soaked in fear and hope alike, realizing that her life had suddenly become larger than herself. The night passed slowly. Rihanna could not sleep. Every sound outside made her flinch, the distant scream of a drone, the murmur of a crowd, the occasional sharp knock of a patrol. Daniel stayed near her, watching, listening, waiting. By dawn, she made a decision. She would not hide, not anymore. The city had turned cold, yes, and the world had tried to make her invisible. But she had already chosen honesty once, and she would do it again if she had to. Daniel smiled when he noticed the resolve forming in her eyes. He knew the city would try to break her. But he also knew something else. Humans were slow, but when they were pushed, they could be relentless. And for Rihanna, that relentlessness might just protect her. The streets outside were harsh and unforgiving. But for the first time, she felt a spark of courage that no storm, no protest, no false record could fully extinguish. And the galaxy, for better or worse, had already begun to watch. The city had grown colder, but the humans were not done. Ambassador Daniel Hargreave understood that fear and lies could spread faster than truth, but he also knew that honesty had power if it was given time to shine. While the streets murmured with suspicion and alien leaders demanded Rihanna's removal, Daniel quietly activated a team of human archivists, experts trained to dig where others would not. Rihanna watched from her small corner room, unsure what to expect. She had returned the purse, yes, but she never imagined that anyone would care enough to defend her beyond words. The humans, she noticed, moved carefully, methodically. They were patient, digging through ancient files, star logs, and burned colonies, examining every fragment of history that had been abandoned or hidden. "Why are they looking?" she asked, her voice fragile, almost like a whisper afraid to wake the world. "They are finding your truth," Daniel said softly. Because the galaxy likes stories that fit fear, but they will respect facts. Days passed. Humans worked without rest. They found old transmissions, declassified reports, even letters from those who had survived plague-stricken planets. Every document painted a picture different from the lies circulating across the media. Riena's species had never betrayed anyone. They had been abandoned during a plague, left to survive on their own, erased from records so that political failures could be hidden. The revelation hit Daniel and his team like a wave. Every fact lined up, undeniable, verifiable. He took the evidence to the council. They were forced to listen. The hall had never been so tense. Delegates murmured in disbelief, scanning the records presented on floating screens. Some tried to argue, pointing to the old propaganda, the rumors. Daniel shook his head. Facts do not bend to fear. Lies may spread, but the truth stands taller. Rihanna had never been in a hall like this before. She watched quietly, hiding behind Daniel's side. Her small form was dwarfed by the giants of diplomacy, the powerful leaders, the voices of the galaxy itself. But now she understood something incredible. Her life, every day on the streets, every cold night, every meal stolen from a trash bin, had led to this moment. The council tried to resist. They whispered accusations, trying to twist the evidence to undermine it. But humans are meticulous, and the proof was absolute. Star logs, old communications, testimonies from survivors, they could not be denied. Finally, a quiet settled over the hall. The delegates had no words. The murmurs of fear and anger dissolved into something heavier, realization. Rihanna felt her chest tighten. She had never been praised, never been defended, never been seen for the person she was. Yet now, in the center of the galaxy's attention, she was not just seen, she was understood. Daniel lowered his voice to her. Do you understand what this means? She nodded, unsure how to speak. They know I didn't lie. They know, he confirmed, and soon everyone else will too. Outside, drones and media relayed the evidence. Across Vierx Prime and other distant worlds, beings who had doubted, judged, and feared her began to reconsider. Some were ashamed. Some were inspired. Some simply watched, quietly, learning a lesson they had forgotten. Truth and courage could come from anywhere, even the streets. Rihanna felt a strange warmth she had never known. It was not the warmth of a bed or a meal. It was the warmth of recognition, of someone finally believing she mattered. She clenched her small fists, remembering the nights of hunger, the cold rain, the loneliness. Every hardship had led to this moment of triumph, not for power, not for money, but for honesty. Daniel looked at her with pride, a smile soft and steady. You changed more than your life, Rihanna. You changed history, and the galaxy is learning that lesson because of you. Tears welled in her mismatched eyes. She had always thought herself small, unimportant, invisible. But now she understood the truth of her mother's words. One good choice can keep your heart alive. The humans had uncovered lies, and in doing so, they had illuminated her life. The city's cold whispers began to fade, replaced by something else: respect, curiosity, and wonder. Rihanna realized that she was no longer just a street girl. She had become a symbol of honesty, of courage, and of the power of doing what is right, even when no one watches. For the first time, Rihanna smiled without fear. She understood that the galaxy was vast and cold, but it could be made warmer by the choices of the small and brave. And she had chosen well. The morning sunlight fell soft and golden over the city of Vierx Prime, but the streets were quieter than usual. People paused as they walked, their steps hesitant, their eyes drawn toward the grand white building where Ambassador Daniel Hargreave had taken Rihanna. Word had spread quickly. The truth about the small alien girl from the streets was finally revealed, and the city seemed to hold its breath. Rihanna stood at the entrance of the embassy, her small frame wrapped in Daniel's coat. She had chosen not to hide behind walls or whispers anymore. For the first time, she was visible not as a shadow, not as a rumor, but as herself, an alien girl who had returned a lost purse and changed the course of events far beyond her understanding. Her mismatched eyes reflected both fear and wonder. She could feel the weight of countless gazes upon her, and instead of running, she held her head high. The council had reversed its decision. The reports had been verified, and the lies had been exposed. Delegates who had demanded her removal now watched silently, unsure how to respond. Protesters lingered outside, but their anger faltered when they saw the girl step forward, unafraid. The city, which had once tried to erase her existence, paused in astonishment. Daniel stayed close, his presence steady and calm. "This is your moment, Rihanna," he said softly. "Not mine, yours." She swallowed, feeling the strange mix of fear and pride. She thought of the bridges she had slept under, the trash bins she had scavenged from, the nights when the rain had beaten against her skin and the cold had seeped into her bones. All of it had led her here. And now she had a choice: to retreat to safety, to vanish back into shadows, or to step forward and claim a place in the world that had always ignored her. She stepped forward. The crowd inside and outside the building fell silent. Some humans, some aliens, watched her with disbelief. How could someone so small, so overlooked, hold such courage? How could one act, a simple, honest return of a purse, bring the galaxy to pause? She began, her voice trembling. "I only did what I thought was right." Daniel nodded, and that was enough to change more than you know. The people around her shifted, and slowly whispers of admiration began to spread. The children of the city, those who often watched from alleys and rooftops, looked at her with hope. The adults who had scorned her now saw proof that courage and honesty could come from the smallest hands. Rihanna's heart swelled, not with pride but with understanding. The city had been harsh, cold, and unforgiving, but even here her actions mattered. Even here her life had significance. The fear that had followed her for years began to fade, replaced by something stronger: purpose. She looked at Daniel, and he smiled at her, eyes reflecting a mixture of pride and quiet awe. "You have done what many cannot," he said. "You have reminded the galaxy that honor is not measured by rank or wealth, but by courage, by choice." Rihanna's tears came unbidden. She had never cried in front of anyone before, never dared to show such vulnerability. But now, the tears were not of sadness. They were of release. The weight of invisibility, of fear, of endless survival was lifting. She had stepped into a new world, and the world had stepped back to recognize her. Outside, the city seemed different. Streets that had once ignored the weak and the small now hummed with cautious respect. People paused in their routines, glancing at the embassy with curiosity and awe. Rihanna had not only survived, she had inspired. The bridges, the alleys, the shadows she had called home all seemed a little less lonely now. Daniel placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Do you see what you've done? Even the streets are quieter because they are listening." Rihanna nodded, her small frame steady despite the tremors of fear still lingering in her chest. She had learned something vital. Courage is contagious, and one honest act can ripple farther than any words, louder than any weapon. For the first time, she did not feel small. For the first time, she did not feel invisible. For the first time, the streets, the city, the galaxy itself seemed to hold space for her. And she would not turn away from it. Years passed, and the city of Vierx Prime began to change in ways no one had imagined. The streets where Rihanna had once scavenged for scraps were no longer silent shadows. In their place, a cluster of buildings rose. A school, a clinic, and a shelter that welcomed the forgotten children of the city. It was called the Returned Hand, named after the small blue alien who had returned a lost purse, and in doing so had returned the hearts of many to honesty and courage. Rihanna had grown taller now, her mismatched eyes shining with a quiet strength. She moved among the children, teaching them, caring for them, and sometimes simply sitting beside those too shy or too scared to speak. She never forgot the streets, never forgot the nights when the rain had soaked her through and the world had ignored her. But now, she knew that even a small act of honesty could create a ripple strong enough to shift the tides of the galaxy. Daniel Hargreave had retired quietly, returning to Earth, but his legacy lingered. He had taught the galaxy that power is not only in wealth, influence, or technology, but in the courage to protect the weak, to honor the honest, and to act when injustice occurs. The human ambassador had made a choice that no protocol demanded, a choice that changed a life and inspired a world. Rihanna often thought of that first day in the White Hall, the rain dripping from her hair, the overwhelming lights, and the voices that had seemed impossible to face. She remembered the fear, the trembling, the choice to do the right thing even when she was invisible. And she realized that every step she had taken since then, the miles walked in the cold, the nights spent in hunger, the quiet bravery she had carried in her chest, had built this moment. The city, too, remembered. Citizens who had once passed her without notice now walked past the returned hand with reverence, understanding that courage can come in the smallest packages. Diplomats and leaders across worlds cited her example in speeches, teaching that honesty and bravery are universal values, not bound by species or rank. One evening, as the twin moons of Vierx Prime rose over the city, Rihanna stood on the roof of the shelter, watching the lights glow softly below. Children laughed and played in the courtyard. Teachers moved among them, helping, guiding, protecting. She felt a warmth in her chest, a quiet joy she had never known in the shadows. The world was still imperfect. There were still streets where some suffered, still leaders who lied, still danger. But she understood that small acts of courage could light the darkest corners. A young girl approached her, holding a small purse she had found on the street. She looked up at Rihanna with wide, hopeful eyes. "What should I do?" she asked. Rihanna knelt to her level, smiling softly. "Return it," she said simply. "Do what is right, even if no one is watching. One honest act can change more than you know." The girl nodded and ran toward the nearest security post, her steps sure and proud. Rihanna watched her go, feeling the same spark she had felt when she had returned Daniel's purse years ago. The cycle of courage continued unbroken. The story of Rihanna, the small alien girl from the streets, spread across galaxies. It became a lesson in schools, a tale for diplomats, and a quiet truth whispered to children in alleys and orphanages alike. Humans and aliens alike measure worth not by strength or power, but by choice, honesty, and courage. And in the quiet moments, Rihanna would look at the night sky, remembering the rain-soaked bridges of her childhood. She would smile, knowing that the smallest hand could leave the largest mark. The galaxy remembered the small blue girl who returned a purse, and in doing so, returned hope. It remembered that even the weakest, the most overlooked, and the most forgotten could teach the universe what it truly meant to be honorable. Because the galaxy learned something simple that day. Honesty is power, courage is strength, and one act of goodness can change the fate of worlds.